The Businessin Wales podcast, the business media for Wales. Hello and welcome back to the Businessin Wales podcast with me, Daniel Bevan. Now, as you can tell, we're not in the usual studio today. That's because we're at the Royal Welsh Showground in Llanelwedd and at the Sport in Wales and Businessin Wales stand in the Sports Village. Now, today's guest has been described as a formidable force for Welsh farming. She's an award winner and has also shared the honour with the likes of Jeremy Clarkson and Caleb Cooper from Clarkson's Farm. Abi Reader, the Deputy President of the NFU Cymru. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Dan. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
No, not at all. My pleasure. It's been a very busy show. We're on the second day, early in the morning. Just talk us through what you've been up to so far.
The Royal Welsh Show is a really great setting for us. It's an opportunity to meet lots of stakeholders, particularly politicians, and there are a lot of them around at the minute. We've obviously got the Senedd elections coming up in May next year. And just a really great chance to get those rural stories out there, make sure that our farmers' voices are heard. They are heart of rural Wales. They underpin a lot of jobs here. And, you know, what a showcase to use.
And just talk a little bit about you before we get into the politics and the nitty-gritty of it. You're, of course, a farmer yourself, outside of your union job. Family farm, presumably?
That's right. So I'm a third generation farmer. I farm with my parents and my uncle. We are mainly a dairy farm, but we've also got sheep. We've got some beef. We do arable. I've just gone into horticulture, and we've got a bit of agroforestry on the farm as well. So there's lots going on, and that's always the way in farming.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was it that drew you to making sure that you continued on the family legacy?
So I had quite an unusual journey into farming. I actually went to school in the middle of Cardiff, and careers advice at that time wasn't, do you want to think about a job in the countryside or think about farming? And it was just really by pure luck. Somebody suggested, once I finished A-levels and I didn't really know what to do, they suggested I went to agricultural college. So I did, but I never thought it would be a viable career. And yet the minute I arrived on that campus, I realised that that's exactly who and what I wanted to be. And I've just loved it ever since.
What's the best thing about being a farmer?
I think there are so many, but walking out of the door in the morning as the sun is coming up, there's no one else around. It's complete silence. I've got my dog beside me and I'm heading to a field of cows. That never ceases to just amaze me and make me really grateful for what I do and the life that I live.
I suppose there's a quaint, sort of beautiful part of nature that farmers get to experience every day that perhaps city dwellers like myself can't appreciate until we come to places like the Royal Welsh and actually go, wow, this is some people's every day.
That's it. We are incredibly lucky people to be able to have all of that nature around us, to have all of our family around us. I mean, a lot of us work with our families. It comes with its challenges, but likewise, it can be cherished. But at the same time, being a farmer, you are dealing with the day-to-day business. You've got to be so many things. You've got to be a plumber, an electrician, a nurse, a midwife, somebody who's there to fix any machine in any way, shape or form. You're usually carrying a lot of baling cord and a lot of tape, and if you can stick it together and keep going, you will. It's long hours. So it comes with all those challenges. It can be quite lonely, but at the same time, it's addictive. I think we're all just completely hung up on our farms.
And touching on that point you made about it being a lonely job sometimes, coming away to a show like the Royal Welsh, I mean, you get to speak to colleagues and people you haven't necessarily seen probably since last year. And this is, how do I say, it's the perfect time for people to talk about farming, even though you're away from the farm.
That's it. If you want the perfect image of what culture is in rural Wales, then there's no better place to come than here, to the Royal Welsh Agricultural Showground. People do meet up. They may not have seen someone for the last 12 months. There's a lot of tradition here. We bring our young people along. They do what we used to do. We've got all of the young farmers competitions. This is where people come and grow and socialise and just enjoy being part of this community. It's such a close-knit community.
This is my first time staying over. Every time I've come to the Royal Welsh before, it's always been up and down in a day. I had no idea the nightlife was quite as exciting as it was. Not that I was partaking, but just going to bed early last night and hearing still people going out. I thought, this is still at the very least a sociable aspect for younger members of the community too.
It really is, and this is a chance for our young people to unwind, and they do have a lot of stressful jobs. when they're working in farming. There can be some, like I said, incredibly long hours. So to come here and let their hair down, and some of them really do let their hair down, but just to do it in that safe setting. And gosh, I remember coming here with a gang of young farmers. You'd be out every night, and then up and off the next day to do your competition, and that's what it is.
Well, it's about 8:15 this morning. There's still some sore heads going past the stand at the minute, so they clearly had a good night. What are your favourite memories of the Royal Welsh?
I did really enjoy doing the young farmers competitions. I particularly enjoy doing the tug of war. When you are involved in a show, it's even better than when you're just wandering around a show. When you're actually involved and you become a part of the people who help make it a success. That's what it's all about. And yeah, young farmers competitions, they develop you in so many ways.
Yeah, of course. And I guess that's a team bonding exercise as well, and letting you know that when you're a bit isolated on the farm as a youngster, that there are other young people like you who are doing just what you're doing as well.
That's it. And then when you finish young farmers and you've got the opportunity to participate in organisations like NFU Cymru, and you can help to get all of those good things back into that industry, make sure that you can maintain opportunities for those young people, make sure that people who are in farming have got a just and a secure business, and that's very much part of what we're trying to do now at NFU Cymru, is sustain that, make sure we can get all that ambition back in. We want to be a progressive, profitable and productive industry, and we can do that from the showground. This is our platform.
And then you obviously continue being a farmer and work at the National Farming Union. Talk me through how you got into the more political side of farming.
Yeah, so I never imagined I was going to be involved in politics. When I finished agricultural university, I just wanted to farm. Yet at the same time, there are lots of factors that impact how we farm. Beyond the farm gate, particularly in politics, it can influence what you do. I got involved, probably 15 years ago now. There was a really bad issue with milk prices. Lots of farmers were struggling. And we all got together and had a very big event to raise it. And it was done with the support and driven by NFU Cymru. And good things happened off the back of it. And that encouraged me to get more involved, because I thought, if I want to have a successful business, I need to make sure I'm driving that. I need to make sure I'm feeding in, influencing the policy. And it was a great opportunity to have my voice heard. I was elected as a county chair. I was the youngest and first female county chair in Wales. I've just climbed the ladder. I did a dairy board chair. I've had opportunity to go onto all sorts of groups talking about issues like TB, which really strike home with me, because we've struggled with it on our own farm. And I've seen changes happen, and they've happened for the better. And I just want more of it.
And as a female farmer, what are the specific issues that affect you?
So I think some of the biggest issues with being a female in farming, it isn't really within the industry, it's outside. People who don't necessarily know what farming's all about have still got that image in their head of old MacDonald. That's not what it is anymore, and probably never was. These people may look like they're wearing overalls that are covered in muck and dirt. These are incredibly professional people. We operate very expensive equipment. We work to the highest level when we're looking at genetics in our livestock. We are world leading in terms of food safety, and I think that's a real accolade for us. Food traceability, we're world leading in that. We've got this incredible landscape that we care for. I mean, when you think about Wales, the first thing most people think of is the green grass of home, isn't it? And that is looked after by farmers. We cover 80% of that landscape, and to have that privilege to be able to feed people, some people who struggle to pay their bills, some people who are struggling to make sure they can nourish their families, to have a share in that responsibility is really important to us.
Mm-hmm. Now, we got to, as I say, talk about the political element of it. I imagine that's going to take up the bulk of the conversation. So let's kick off with what was the run up to the show, the sustainable farming scheme getting its final draft from the Welsh Government. It was important, I would imagine, for the Welsh Government to get that kind of detail out before the Royal Welsh Show. Otherwise, it would have been a bit of an elephant in the room, I suppose. Do you feel like it was perhaps put out a bit too quickly, though?
Well, I suppose it was never really going to be a right time. There's been a lot of trepidation with it. We obviously had protests and a lot of anxiety in the last 18 months. So at some point, this news was going to have to break. And we know that going into 2026, the Welsh Government want this new scheme to come live. So, we are less than 6 months to go before the 1st of January. Farmers need to plan. They're very long-term businesses. There will be young stock on the ground today, so lambs that have been born and calves that have been born this year, which will be not producing food or earning an income until the next year. And there's a lot of long-term planning with that. We've got drought at the moment. Lots of farmers have had an early harvest. They'll have already bought their seed for next year, and we're still waiting for the details of this scheme. In terms of how it landed on farm, again, because of the mixed emotions that have come with it, farmers are very cautious, and they're right to scrutinise what is in front of them. There's still a lot of detail to come out. We've had a document that's 216 pages. That's an enormous amount of information for a farmer to absorb, and there's more detail to come. So, today and throughout the week, farmers are going to be going onto the Welsh Government stand, doing this ready reckoner, trying to work out whether the scheme will work for them. And then we'll take it forward. If we are getting a lot of negative feedback from our members that they're uncertain about this, we can feed that in. Likewise, if we get a lot of positive feedback, then we know that things are going to move forward, hopefully successfully. And it's just wait and see really what our members think.
I appreciate that perhaps many of our listeners aren't aware of the nitty-gritty of all of this. So let's just get a bit of context. The Sustainable Farming Scheme is there to essentially replace former funding from the EU. And the backlash last year, the year before, saw the biggest protest the Senate has ever seen. And also all the Wellington boots as well, that really struck home with quite a visual, striking image. As you say, this has been 18 months in the making now. What are the changes that you're happy to see, and what are the changes that you'd like to see still happen?
Yeah, well, I'll recap on that sort of back
course.
history. So the farm support that came in has been in for many years. Post-war, farm support came in to make sure that we never ran out of food, because we experienced that. We had the ration books, everything back around the time of the war when people were really struggling to feed their families. That can never happen again. That is why farm support came in. And the reason it has to stay there is because there's so much volatility around. We're fighting with the weather. There are a few businesses that are dictated by the weather as farming is. There are some, but no one really is at the coalface like a farming business. And there is no country in the developed world that does not support food production. And we'd be one of the lowest, but it's still incredibly important. And it's to make sure those on lowest income are fed. We've left Europe. We've got a scheme now that is going to be designed for Wales, in Wales, for Welsh farmers. So there's a lot of nervousness around that. People were very concerned. Last year, there was an economic impact assessment that was done, and it suggested on the new scheme as it was then, we could see up to 5,500 job losses. We could lose 125,000 livestock from our landscape. That's colossal. And that would be linked to those job losses. And there could be up to £200 million lost off the bottom line of farm business incomes. No business that I could think of would ever back an impact assessment like that. And this led to the protest. So we've had a round table now. NFU Cymru, we requested the government, could they set that up, get stakeholders back in the room, go back to the drawing board. The new scheme is announced. I think the scheme on a whole we're relatively happy with. We've got what we call this universal layer. So there will be an entry level for farmers to go into. We want it accessible for all, and they will receive this baseline payment. And a critical part of that is this social payment that recognises that the culture and all of the extra things that farmers provide over and above food, but just isn't paid for in food, because you just couldn't ask consumers to pay for that, especially again on these lower incomes. So this baseline payment is in there to offer stability. Farmers will receive a sum of money to invest in better technology, in better genetics, in better farming techniques to keep that price of food down. And, that is okay. We are concerned about things such as there was a safety net. If farmers weren't happy about going into the scheme next year, they could have kept with the old scheme for another, we were given to believe another 5 years, but it would taper off. But in year one, it would just be 20% less of the scheme you were on the year before. And that was a nice safety net for farmers. If they were nervous about that sustainable farming scheme, they could have gone with that. Unfortunately, now they've changed that. And if farmers are still nervous about the sustainable farming scheme, instead of taking 80% of the payment they had last year, it's now only 60%. And that's quite a big stick to force farmers into a scheme. And, businesses are delicate, whatever sector you're in. And if you go into something without a good feeling about it, I don't think that's a great way to start your business off. So it was a shame to have that. We're also very concerned, completely out of the blue. So it wasn't within the roundtable discussions anywhere. The Welsh Government came in at the last minute and said, well, OK, we've designed the scheme for now, but in 2027, we might reduce that universal payment, that baseline payment, and put the money elsewhere. That's a red line for us. We don't want to see money going into other areas where it gets diluted. You want the money on the farm. The farmer will invest it where they see fit, and you'll get the best reward. And we've proved that with other schemes that government have run in the past. So it is effective.
From the mood music that you've been hearing from Welsh Government and people around them, do you think that they're open to listening?
So again, we're not really asking to redesign the scheme. There are a few things we'd like to tweak. There are some members, particularly perhaps those coastal members, but that's just one example, who might struggle to get sufficient habitat that might bar them from going into the scheme. We can't have that. We need every farmer to be able to access it, regardless of where they farm. But we're not really looking to change the overall design of the scheme. What we want is fairness for those farmers to be able to go into it and for them not to feel pressure. And it's a shame that they've changed that taper, and it would be detrimental to Welsh agriculture if in a year's time they then shrunk that stability pot. That is so important. These farming businesses are on a knife edge, and when you are fighting drought, flooding, geopolitical issues, and you're still trying to keep that food security going, we can't have a situation where our farmers don't have confidence.
One of the most controversial parts of the previous scheme, which has been taken out now, is the land that's covered by trees and habitats. So tell us a little bit about what's been changed in that, and also, when, as the Welsh Government would say, there's a climate emergency and we should all be doing what we can to affect that. Why shouldn't farmers be part of that?
So yes, in the original scheme, there was a condition or potential condition that in order to be successful to get onto the scheme in the first place, you would have to have at least 10% tree coverage on your farm. Now, for those farms who've got a woodland and plenty of trees around, that's great. They could sail in, no problem. But for those farms who don't have that, again, in some very exposed areas, or you might have somebody who is a tenant who just rents a field, that would instantly bar them from getting in there, which means that they would then have to look at planting trees in certain areas. What you do then is you change the value of your farmland for a start. So anybody who's got a mortgage, got finance, whatever it may be, if you suddenly change the value of that land, your banks are going to get nervous. So clearly that was not going to work for farming. But likewise, if you start to look at your business as a whole, and I always compare it to a restaurant. Imagine if you've got a restaurant with 10 tables and you're asked to take one table out in the corner and not use it. Now, the government might support you to not use that table. They'd give you a small fee. But likewise, instead of having 10 tables in your restaurant now, you've only got 9, which suddenly means you may not need the same number of staff. If you're employing somebody to do cleaning or cooking, you may not need that same labour unit. They may not live in that village anymore because they haven't got enough work, and people will move out of the area. You can put pressure then on whether schools will stay open. There's all of these wider consequences that happen because a government has come in and tried to make a business change. Now, farms are like any other business; they're market driven. There may be a farm support there that helps innovation and growth and development, but we follow the market. And adding in 10% trees, which may not fit into your business plan, was never going to work. And it's good to see that they have listened and they've come back from that. And we'll wait and see what happens.
Let's move on to inheritance tax, which is another part of, it's not a Welsh government policy, it's a UK government policy, but it's a part of the anxieties that farmers are feeling at the minute. The president of the NFU wrote to the Prime Minister on Sunday. We covered that on the Businessin Wales newsletter and website. Just tell us a little bit about what that letter said, first of all.
So the letter was outlining the very deep concerns we've got about inheritance tax. I mean, we spent quite a bit of time now talking about the sustainable farming scheme, but actually compared to the impact of the inheritance tax, the sustainable farming scheme is pretty low down the pecking order. Inheritance tax is the biggest problem for UK farming PLC. It's not just in Wales, it will be UK wide. It's the ability to be able to pass that farm on to the next generation, whether they are necessarily a direct descendant or not. It's that ability to pass that farm down without having to pay an incredible tax. And it's because land value goes up. It's got nothing to do with the farmer. This is a value on paper. They don't have that cash in the bank. So if you get to a point where a member of the family dies, and they may not necessarily be an old person, it could be someone who's had a tragic accident, someone who's caught a terrible illness, whatever it may be. If somebody dies and that farm is passed on, there's no cash in the bank to pay it, which means that whoever is inheriting that farm may be forced to sell off a part of that business. Now, again, we go back to this analogy of the 10 tables in a restaurant. Imagine if you had to sell off 5 tables to keep the restaurant open, your restaurant would no longer be viable. It's exactly the same for the farm. They don't have this flexibility. And if the UK government do not get on top of this, they will absolutely decimate the rural economy. It doesn't matter whether you're in Wales, England, Scotland, or Northern Ireland, they are going to cause untold damage. And I have had some terrible stories from farmers. I was contacted over a week ago by a widower who is in her 80s, who has told me since the 31st of October, not a day has gone by when she has not cried about the situation that this is causing for their families. I have had young people who've rung me up to say they're preparing their sons and daughters for the day when granddad dies, and they are likely to have to sell the family home, sell the family farm, and move on. Now, these are businesses that feed us. They make sure the wolf stays from the door. And we're lucky loads of people see full shelves. That does not happen by chance. There is a lot of heartache that happens to get some of that food on the shelf. When people are fighting the drought, or they're fighting a terrible disease that's gone through their crop or their livestock, and they're doing anything and everything to keep that business together, there aren't loads of people queuing up to do those sorts of jobs. There are people that come in from outside of farming, and it's absolutely brilliant, but it is a certain personality that produces our food. In the same way as we have some incredible people who work in our emergency services or any other amazing jobs, these are people who are committed to food production, and they'll do it whatever you throw at them until the government through this. And they will take away that ability for us to be food secure, and they will decimate our rural economies. And it is incredibly disappointing that our Welsh government is not doing more to advocate for us. We need them to stand up, go to London and advocate for us, because you look at everybody who's on the showground today, they're all at risk. It's not just us.
As a third generation farmer yourself, then, needless to say that you feel this very personally as well.
I do. So we're all affected. It doesn't matter who you are or what age, and we could all die out of order. My father is in his mid-80s. He's got severe heart failure and dementia. Some days he doesn't necessarily know who I am. If he dies after April 2026, the ability for me to inherit that farm is impossible. There is no way I could possibly pay that inheritance tax bill. It would take me in excess of 20 years to be able to pay. And that's if I took no profit and no earnings from that business whatsoever. We don't generate enough income from food to be able to pay these hundreds of thousands that the government are asking us to do. They're not asking any other business to pay that colossal amount. And it feels like the rural community is under attack at this moment in time. And the UK government needs to take a step back and look at other options. We've put other options in. We understand that there is a need to make sure that there's this central pot that can support all these problems we've got in the UK. We understand that. But we can't have this disproportionate payment coming from farmers just because they happen to own land that has gone up exponentially in value in a means that's beyond their control. There's so much demand for land at the minute, whether it's for building or solar panels or roads, whatever it may be. The farmers have got no control over that. All they've got control over is how they can produce food one day after the other.
I'm sure there'll be some people watching this who say, well, the actual rules themselves are going to be bringing farmers more in line to people who aren't from a farming background. And you've given some very heartbreaking examples there of how it will affect the rural community. But no doubt there are lots of people who are struggling at the minute. So the question that I think a lot of people will be asking is, why shouldn't farmers be paying the same, or actually this is still less, than people who are outside of the agriculture sector?
Yeah, so the answer back to that is farmers will have to pay an enormous bill, because our factory floor is very, very different to any other business. Because we use a lot of our landscape to grow our food, it will incur a massive tax bill, one that is way beyond their control. I mean, we're talking about farmers who are on very modest incomes. They do not have that cash in the bank. On the death of a parent, or it could be on the accidental death of a middle generation, there is going to be an enormous bill which will be way beyond a farmer's ability to control it. This will take the confidence out of the industry. You've got a farmer who might think, well, actually, I could do with buying a new tractor for next year because the old one is broken, or I need to invest in a new shed, or I need to buy a new bull. They're going to stop that because anything they do on that business to increase that value is going to add more of a tax burden to them. If we get farms that are underinvesting, we are not going to be able to produce the same volume of high quality food that we do. We're then going to look outside the UK to fill that need. Is that food going to come from another country that has the same environmental regulations as us, the same safety regulations? What about the labour conditions that we put our people through? Is it going to match up to all of those things? So this is far more widely reaching than any normal inheritance tax bill, and that's why it came in.
And I mean, the crux of the issue, I suppose, is that farmers are, for lack of a better phrase, asset rich but cash poor. The land is extremely high in value. There's high value farm equipment as well, but you're not getting enough for the product that you make. Is the issue actually more that people aren't paying enough at the supermarkets for the products that you and your colleagues make?
So this is always an interesting question, because yes, it's always going to be good if we could get a better return off the produce we sell, then that might solve the problem. But let's just remember how many people out there are struggling to pay their day-to-day bills. And again, it goes back to this reason for farm support. If you can inject money into farming businesses right at the ground level to help them improve that technology, improve their opportunities, then you can keep the price of food down in that respect. The inheritance tax bill is a means to make sure we've got a secure food production, because no money changes hands. If we can enable this land to pass on smoothly from one generation to the next without adding that extra cost burden, then it's not going to have any impact on the cost of anybody's food. It's not going to have any impact on the money that we see going in or out of government, and it just keeps that status quo. And I would never. I farm right next door to Barry. I am very conscious that every morning there are people who get up and they do not have enough money to feed their children breakfast, or children might come home from school in the evenings and they may not be able to have anything until they go back to school the next day. We've got to look after those people, and we need very, very responsible policies here. And the inheritance tax is one of them. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's one of those ones that will help to secure that.
So we've talked a great deal about inheritance tax and also the SFS scheme. What are the other key issues? Because there are no doubt many other things that British farmers, Welsh farmers are facing at the minute that probably keep them up at night a little bit.
So I suppose, look, it's like any other business. There are lots of things that will keep people up at night. And again, like any other business, farmers will still get up in the morning and go out because they love what they do. And we can talk about all of these very damning things like inheritance tax or the nervousness around sustainable farming scheme. But again, what you captured here today is everything that farmers are proud of. It's that ambition that we've got in the industry, our ambition for growth, to make sure we can get more people into farming. And we're seeing more and more people thinking about studying agriculture, going into whether it's food production, going into that wider supply chain. We are part of the largest industry in Wales, the food and drink industry. It's bigger than car and aerospace combined. It is over £9 billion of value there for that Welsh economy. And we underpin that. There are over 50,000 people employed on farms across Wales. And combined with the food and drink employment, that's nearly 250,000 people in that entire supply chain. We're threaded throughout rural Wales, and we are so interconnected. The potential that we've got there to grow is just unbelievable. And if we can just get over these hurdles, get that ambition in, get that confidence in. I'm really lucky. I've just employed an 18-year-old. She's been working on my farm part-time while she's been at college for the last 2 years. And I've just offered her a full-time job. People like that are the future. That's why I do what I do at NFU Cymru. We need to make sure that we can create a future for those people that is secure and sustainable, and it's ambitious, because these people will deliver. These young people are there ready to go, and let's just bring the best out in them.
So if you were to take the temperature of Welsh farming at the minute, what would you say is the overall feeling? Is it anxiety? Is it cautious optimism?
So farmers are nervous. they're really, really nervous. They're getting all sorts of difficult messages out of the UK government and out of Welsh government. It can be very unsettling. We've obviously got the elections coming up in the Senedd next year as well. So farmers are nervous. But again, you have days like today, and farmers are great at pushing all that to the back of their mind and living in the moment and being surrounded by your community, showing off what you've got, whether it's in the horticulture tent or the livestock ring or wherever it may be, showing off everything that you have put blood, sweat and tears in. It just makes them feel incredibly proud. So that anxiety is always there, but that ambition and that passion that sits in the background is always going to be pushing those farmers forward and forward a bit at a time.
Well, just before I let you go, Abi, the question I always like to ask at the end of these podcasts is if there's any advice you had for your younger self, what would it be?
Gosh, for advice for my younger self, I think it's absolutely, if you think there's an opportunity that's come your way, you grab it. You grab it with both hands, because you never know if that's going to come around again. And if somebody says, would you like to have a go at this? And you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm not sure. Forget about the not sure. You say yes. Someone gave me a piece of advice once. They said, you say yes first and you work out how you're going to make it happen later. And I try and use that wherever I go, because if you can network, grow that number of people that you speak to, the opportunities are endless. And I've been so privileged to meet some incredible people who've opened a lot of doors for me. So yeah, don't hesitate. If there's an opportunity there, you grab it. If you fail, no one else is going to notice other than you.
Wonderful. Well, Abi, you've got a very busy day ahead, as do I. So thank you. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time, for being on the Businessin Wales podcast, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Diolch yn fawr.
The Businessin Wales podcast, the business media for Wales.